This is my 2021 Royal Enfield Himalayan. And I've had it since July of 2021. My wife and I one day were out driving around, and we stopped by it wasn't the plan, we just saw a Royal Enfield dealer, and I was like, hey, let's just go in here real quick. I truly had no intention to buy a motorcycle that day. I really just wanted to look at the Himalayan. I had been a fan of the Himalayan for since it came out, and I hadn't really seen one in person. And I don't have social media anymore, but at the time I had social media, and I had just seen someone get one, and so I think it was just fresh on my mind, and I was like, hey, let's just stop in here and look at one real quick. Well, anyway, we left with it that day, and I've put 6,000 miles on it since. That was July of last year. It looks like I don't know how to ride a motorcycle. I swear I do. That was July of last year, 6,000 miles since then. It is currently October of 2022. And I have loved this thing. I've had it so, one of the things, when I saw people who had this bike, like in India, they had so much shit on it. They had their whole family and bags of rice, and I was just like, damn, that thing looks capable. And it is. I mean, I've loaded it down with confidence, just because I've seen them do it. And so I think I've had my wife on the back and like a week's worth of camping gear, and rode it like 400 miles in a weekend. And the only issue I had was that there was so much weight on the bike that doing turns like this one right here were a little weird, because it was sitting so low to the ground. You were just scraping pegs on the smallest turns, but it did it without issue. But yeah, so I don't know all the horsepower torque specs. I probably should have prepped before I filmed this video, but it's not much. I think it's like 80 something and something. I don't know, totally made up that number. But we left with it that day, and I didn't get off of it until I think I put like 3,000 or 4,000 miles on it before I put it down and got him out of the car. I rode it all through the summer. Got really hot a couple times. It's a single cylinder air-cooled 411 cc engine, and so it would get hot. And I live in Texas. Texas summers were sweltering, but it never overheated, and even when I ended up in traffic one day, just sitting there. If I'd have had raw chicken wrapped in foil around my crotch that day, it probably would have been cooked by the time we were done riding. It was so hot, but it did it. And the whole time, that's something with this bike, is that anytime I'm in like some kind of stressful situation, I don't know why, but it just seems comforting that I'm like, well, they do it in India, and so it's just a lot of comfort in that. I'm like, well, hey, they do it in India. There's plenty of traffic in India, so I'm sure this bike will be fine, and it has been. I use the India metric to ensure that I'm not pushing this bike past its limits. This thing, for being an adventure bike, corners really well. There's no limit to how deep you want to corner this thing in optimal conditions. Obviously if it's wet or there's gravel or something, well, that changes things. But on a dry, nice paved road, lean it as deep as you want. You're not going to push it past its limits. Especially, I used to have the factory tires that were on here. They were some really cruddy, knobby tires. I wasn't as confident with those, but I put these Pirelli Night Dragons on because it's a street tire, but I spend most of my time in this thing on the street. And so I put these Pirelli Night Dragons on, and ever since then, you can lean this thing as deep as you want, as hard as you want, as fast as you want. I've really, not been able to outride my own ability on this setup. I do sacrifice some traction on the off-road. I got in some sandy little soil the other day. I still do take it off-road, but man, it is night and day difference. The front is just washy the whole time with these street tires on, and that kind of sucks because I do miss the traction that I had with the more aggressive enduro tire. But for what I get out of it on the street, it's a small price to pay. You know, and at the end of the day, you can ride any bike, any tire, in any situation. It all comes down to rider skill. You could probably ride it with just bare rims on ice if you had enough rider skill, you know. But you know, speaking of rider skill, I've been riding motorcycles since I was 3 years old. My grandmother got me my first motorcycle when I was 3. And that wasn't the only time I had a motorcycle. I rode motorcycles all growing up. Dirt, street, 4-wheelers, 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, didn't matter. I'm gonna pass this car because it's a little ridiculous. I'm trying to cruise, brother. But, you know, I got my first, like, cruiser road bike when I had turned 18. I turned 18, moved to California, and I wanted a bike out there. Trying to live the California dream, baby. And it was a Honda Shadow is what it was. And I rode it. Actually, I didn't get off of a motorcycle until, like, that was like 2012 or 13. And I didn't get off of a motorcycle, I believe, until 2016 or 17. I mean, I rode a bike for like 3 or 4 years straight. Different bikes. Had the Honda Shadow for a while. I sold it when I left California because I didn't want to bring it down. One of my regrets, I wish I had ridden the motorcycle from California back home to Texas. I kind of regret that I didn't do that because I don't know when I'll be able to make time to do that again. But I sold it, caught a plane ticket, literally touched down, and went and got a Yamaha V-Star the same day. Rode that V-Star for a long while. But I have been riding for quite a long time, and I've made quite a lot of mistakes. I think I've been in 8 self-induced motorcycle wrecks. Call them wrecks, they were just, you know, spills and dumps. One time I was coming off of the highway, and there was like kind of a sweeping bank off the highway, and I was in it, man, and I was leaning in. This was on the Yamaha V-Star when I got back. And there was a car dealership on the corner of the highway, and they had their sprinkler system on, and this was at nighttime, so I couldn't really see that the sprinkler systems had been on. And so I'm in that corner, man, and I hit that little wet spot for the sprinkler system coming off the highway, and thankfully my trajectory was pretty much already straightened out into the next road that I was going into, because when the bike washed, I just went sliding, man. But like I said, it was late at night, there was no one on the road, no one else was involved, I didn't get hurt. Thankfully, at the time, I was wearing a G-Shock and not gloves. As you can see, I learned my lesson there. But at the time, I wasn't wearing gloves, but I was wearing my G-Shock. And so when I slid, I kind of rolled over onto my side with my hands up and put the face of my G-Shock on the ground and just used that to support myself as I slid. And it ground down the G-Shock all the way to the actual crystal on it, or plastic, or whatever it is. It grounded down to the face. And yeah, thank God I had that on, but no injuries, man. You know, at the time I think I was like 20 years old or something, so these days I'd be pretty sore. But yeah, back then, nah. Got up the next day and kept riding. I had engine guards on it at the time, and so the engine guards ate up most of the damage, and the bike was still super rideable. But it was because of those wrecks that my mother pleaded with me to get off the motorcycle, so I got an Oldsmobile Cutlass, a 98 Oldsmobile Cutlass. I loved that car. That was the first time I had been in a car in basically most of my adult life. You know, it was the first time that I had rocked a car for my transportation consistently. It was so nice. I had no idea how tired of being on a bike I was. Because, man, I rode that bike in the rain. I rode those bikes in the freezing cold. I rode all the time. You know, another crazy thing too is that I don't remember wearing ear protection during any of that. These days I'm so protective of my ears, and I have normal hearing, but I just was riding that bike all the time with no ear protection. And I imagine that the wind coming off of coming off the, being on the highway and stuff, it's probably not good for my ears. That's definitely sustained 80 decibel damage right there. This is one of the things I love about this bike, is that just tear off, man. Just tear off. You see some little trail you want to hit, it's no big deal to come down here and check it out. It's a little washy with these street tires, as I mentioned, but it's not too bad. It's kind of cool. Let's see what this does. This bike is so well balanced and lightweight and low to the ground. Doing a little obstacle like that doesn't stress me out. If anything, getting it stuck in the sand stresses me out more than the obstacle. Nice little spot down here. I think I'm gonna film my intro video right here. Give me a second. Okay, we're back on. Back on the road again. Gosh, you really just gotta keep it pinned in this silt and sand, because it does not want to work with me. Just staying in it. I don't want to get stuck in that sand. Yeah. There we go. Oh, it used to be so much easier with the dirt tires, I wish I could just snap my fingers and put them back on. We'll get back on the road here. Yeah, man, so you never know what you're gonna find on this bike. I hadn't been down there before. I mean, I'd seen it when I'd come down this road, but I'd never seen that exactly. If you saw the video that I did on my Chevy Tracker, then you saw that other little spot that I found when I was on the bike. That was just an accident, man. Out riding around, seeing which roads go where, and finding little gold spots on the bike. I was fortunate I was able to take the tracker down there. Part of the reason I love the tracker too is it'll go anywhere. I think I mentioned it in the other video with the tracker, but that's a requirement of my vehicles. I don't want to be limited by my vehicles and where I can go and what I can explore. That's why it'll be a long time before I ever get a brand new car, because I want to take care of it. I want to take real good care of it. I say that, but I got this bike when it was brand new, 2021, fresh off the fucking floor, and I was dogging it, dude. I was like, I'm gonna keep it, it's gonna be nice, I'm gonna pass it down to my kids. It was the first new vehicle I had ever had. I'd never bought anything new in my life. I'd never made payments on anything in my life. This was the first thing that I actually sought to make payments on, because it was so ridiculously cheap. And I finally had a good job where I could afford those payments after going to school, but I was like, man, I'm making payments on it, I'm gonna keep it nice. No, dude, that is not what happened. I would just do exactly what you just saw me do. I would find something, take it as far as I could. I was laying the bike over. I don't know if you could tell, but the handlebars are bent. I want to get some new ones, but it's bent down on this side because I dropped the bike like the first week that I had it. Bent the handlebars up. Windy days on the highway, this thing gets a little uncomfortable, especially with crosswinds. But from a speed perspective, it's like you really are just gonna top out at like 70 miles an hour in this thing. Maybe even less if you're dealing with a lot of, hill climbing, elevation changing. But there is some things you can do to it to improve that quality quite considerably, actually. There's some booster packs that you can put on it to change the way that the air-fuel ratio works to give you a little bit more power and torque. There's different ratios that you can run on front and rear sprockets. And that's another thing with this bike is like all the accessorizing and all of the upgrades and mods that you want to do, it's all ridiculously cheap. The fuel cans that I have up here, the saddlebags, the backrest, I replaced the front headlight. All of those things, I think it cost me less than $1,000, which is unheard of. I used to be a Harley guy. I used to work at Harley Davidson as a technician, and I was always floored at how much they wanted for a lot of their accessories. Some of it's worth it. The saddlebags that they have, the fiberglass saddlebags, a lot of that stuff you do want to spend good money on, and it will last you, especially how good and how easy it is to take the pannier on and off, But there was some other Harley stuff that I was just like, really? You want that much money for that? Kind of crazy. But this thing, not so much, man. I mean, you could completely mod it out for very reasonable prices. And the entry price on it is unbeatable too. You're talking just $5,000 or $6,000 to get a brand new motorcycle, reliable, well-known brand, quality parts, capable bike. $5,000 or $6,000. I've spent $6,000 on used bikes before that weren't as reliable or capable as this thing is. But to get, and I went and checked out the 2022 Royal Enfields, and the new ones have a lot of really quality upgrades. There wasn't much change on them from year to year, but the 2021 to 2022 change was really quality. They improved, the rear racks. I think they improved some of the headlight design. Anyway, it's a better bike. So it's good to see that their engineers are continuing on the improvement of the Himalayan, because this bike deserves that kind of attention to detail. Ride quality on this bike is really good, especially whenever you have a proper windscreen. That happened in another accident of mine. Actually, it wasn't my fault. I remember I had it parked on gravel and it was a really windy day, and I went to work, and when I came home, the wind had knocked it over and it broke my windscreen. But I think it sustained damage in a previous accident, which is why it broke so easy in the first place. I would like to get a new windscreen on it, but I'm kind of waiting to do a lot of the upgrades that I want to do on this bike until I can do them all at once. Because I do want to upgrade the front sprocket. I do want to upgrade get that little power pack booster so I can get a little extra power. Because I really only ride this bike for long distance highway rides. I do little things like what we just saw, and I go back and forth to work on it a lot. But I feel like if it had a little more highway capability, more highway comforts, I would feel a little more emboldened to take it, on a 1,000-mile trip or something like that. Because it is a comfortable bike, at least for me. I'm 6 foot tall, and I've heard from other people who are taller than that it can get uncomfortable because it's a little small and your knees are running into stuff. But again, I know that they changed some of those uncomfortabilities on the 2022 model. A lot of people were complaining about knocking their knees on the tanks and stuff. And I know that for the 2022 model, they changed the geometry just a little bit on the front tank and on the front racks to support larger riders, longer legs. So that's kind of cool. But at least for this model and the previous models, if you were, 6'3" or something, this bike was going to get pretty uncomfortable pretty quick. But for me, it's really comfortable, man. I just would like a couple of things to make it more highwayable I love the engine guards for all of the peace of mind that they provide. But I think a often overlooked feature of the engine guards is being able to put your feet up on this bike. You know, it really gives you a nice improved ride quality for a long distance riding. Kind of have your feet, knees in the breeze, as they say, in the chopper world. All those chopper daddies and mommies out there. A lot of chopper mommies now too. But yeah, knees in the breeze, man. It's a good riding style. You know, I also like these tanks for the simple reason that you can kick your feet up on them like that too. When I have like my backpack and everything on here, I used to have cruise control on here, I took it off. When I had my backpack and everything, I'd set my cruise control and put my feet up here and just lean back. And I'd be riding like that for a while. Do I recommend that? Absolutely not. But have I done it on every bike I've ever owned? Yes. So, you know, get comfortable with your bike. Especially if you're going to ride it for a long period of time, you're going to have to find some different riding positions. A couple of interesting features. This bike has ABS on it, which is really cool for a bike of this price point to have functional ABS. You know, I thought it would annoy me, but it hasn't. I've taken real advantage of the ABS. It improves the stopping power in any condition, not necessarily just wet, sliding conditions, but in any condition, you can really squeeze down on the brakes and feel confident that you're not going to slip and slide on it, which is not something I can say for any other bike that I've ever owned. But like I said, it's the only bike I've ever had that had ABS on it. So for the other bikes that I've owned, I had a Harley Sportster 1100 that didn't even have a front brake and had a drum rear. So, oh no, I'm lying. It was a disc rear, but it didn't have a front brake. So, yeah, brakes are good. Disc brakes front and rear on this thing. ABS, stop on a dime, man. As far as the distance goes, I don't really remember, but I want to say like 300 or something miles on a full tank. You know, getting about 50 miles to the gallon, which is pretty good. And between these two gasoline panniers, or whatever you want to call them, auxiliary tanks, between these two auxiliary tanks, you know, I'm getting about 500 to 600 miles. Well, I've really fucking screwed the pooch on this one. This guy's gonna let me over. Thank you. Didn't know if I was coming or going on that one. This thing's got 5 speeds to it. Man, do I wish it had a 6th. That would make the highway riding so much better. But, you know, it is what it is. 5 is good. When you get on the highway and you start getting into the 5,000 and 6,000 RPM range on the highway, you're like, man, just for the engine's sake, you know, for the motor's sake, I really wish there was just one more gear. Kind of bring those RPMs back down to 2,000 and 3,000, a little more cruisy. This bike is a Swiss Army knife of bikes, you know. It'll do it all. Compared to a KLR, because I've had a KLR as well, and I ride with buddies who have KLRs. And in comparison to a KLR, it's more on the off-road side. I might catch flack for saying that, but again, this is just my opinion. You know, oh, that's pretty cool. Nice. The KLRs are way more highway capable, and they get a little heavy and a little tall off-road. Can it do it? Yes. It all comes down to rider skill and ability and how much time you spent on a KLR, I suppose. But as far as like fresh out the gate, you just never rode a motorcycle and now you have to, and you have to ride the KLR or you have to ride the Royal Enfield, I'm going to put my money for the beginner rider on the Royal Enfield. Because the Royal Enfield, with the way how tall it is and how light it is, it's very confidence inspiring, and you can navigate yourself really well in any type of terrain. But as I've mentioned previously in this video, it doesn't shine on the highway like the KLR does. You know, whether you're a beginner or not, as I mentioned, not, oh damn, look at this hoss daddy. As I mentioned before, I'm not a novice rider. I've been riding for a long time, but I think whether you've been riding forever or whether you're just now riding, the Royal Enfield is a good way to go, no matter where you're at with that. You know, if you're on the 6 foot and taller side of things, if you're on the broken ain't got no money side of things, if you're on the want to off-road and camp, or if you're on the want to just commute to work side of things, you know, this bike will impress you in every one of those fronts. And for how easy it is to maintain and how inexpensive it is to maintain, you know, it's obviously a huge bonus. Too, as a new rider, you don't want to go out and buy a $30,000 bike with fiberglass panniers that are going to break and shatter as soon as you lay it over, because you will lay it over. It is not an if, it's a when. So this is something where you wouldn't feel bad about laying it down. You wouldn't feel bad about doing your own custom modifications either. You know, if you wanted to put a bunch of bags on it or put some panniers on it, you know, you wouldn't feel bad about doing so, because this bike kind of lends itself to that. You know, this little front rack that's right here, it comes with the bike, and it has all of these preformed bosses that allow you to install anything you want to into those little holes. So if you want to put, you know, some pod lights on it, or you want to put some auxiliary tanks on it, or you want to put an axe on it, whatever you want to put, there's little, I think they're 10 mil. 10 mil, I can't remember the thread pitch, but it's a super standard size, metric size that you can get from any hardware store, or probably Walmart or something. But you can attach anything you want to. Whoa! Big crack in the ground. I don't know why, I kind of forgot it's Saturday. I was like, why are there so many bikes on the road? It's Saturday, baby. It's Saturday in October. Pray for all the safety of all the other riders out there. Well, guys, I guess I'm gonna sort of call it on the moto vlog aspect of things. I'm gonna do some more beauty shots, do some cool shots out here. But you know, before I go, I did want to mention, man, if you're gonna be riding a motorcycle, just keep in mind, man, you gotta ride safe, man. I know that's such an overplayed thing to say, but especially if you're a young man or young woman, long-term consequences just don't register in the prefrontal cortex of the undeveloped young mind. So really do your best to think about the decisions that you're making. Make sure you're making right ones that'll last a long time. You know, right now I'm rolling up to my father's gravesite. So this is where my father is buried. He died whenever I was 8 years old, and he died skydiving, and he was 31 years old. I'm 30 right now, so it's kind of sobering to be this age, and I've got a son on the way. But I was 8 years old, and my dad just went skydiving and made a few mistakes, you know, and it happens. But I want you to remember this while you're riding. Whether you've been riding or whether you are going to be riding, I want you to remember how fragile life can be. You know, doing risky things, such as riding motorcycles or skydiving, They'll end you up here, man. They will end you up in a grave site. I don't even know. Oh, here it is. Here lies Benjamin Allen Freeman, June 20th, 2000. I know this video kind of took an awkward turn, and honestly I really didn't mean for it to. I was just out riding, and then I remember my dad was buried out here, and I thought, well, this will be a good lesson for some of the people out there. But anyway, enjoy your riding. If I have made one thing clear, it is to buy Royal Enfield and ride safe. I'll take it easy.